When I picked up today's piece, I got the question, why did you buy that? That's really ugly. Firstly, I didn't buy it, it was free, so that makes it a lot better. And secondly, most things that are ugly can be made pretty again. So that is what I did today. I've upcycled a faux leather mirror into something that is a lot more natural looking and definitely more interesting. See what you think. So this is a very simple plain mirror, perfectly good condition though. The only detailing it had were the stitching marks along the corners, otherwise just straightforward. Nothing offensive about it, just not very interesting. The backing had come off slightly, so I did need to glue that down to make it nice and sturdy, otherwise it just needed a bit of a clean. To clean this faux leather I used some dish soap. So funny story, recently I was in Canada and I saw Dawn dish soap and I thought, oh, I need to buy that because this is something that I know a lot of my American and Canadian friends recommend for cleaning. So I bought it, of course, brought it all the way back home to England and then decided to Google it because I had something in the back of my mind that maybe this was the same as Fairy, which is what I use at home, and it is, or at least it's the same company and basically the same product as well. So to clean this mirror, I used some warm soapy water and wiped over it with a clean cloth. Very straightforward, and unfortunately I did this on a really warm day, so it dried really quickly, and it's just important to get all of those soap suds off as well before you paint. Now to get to gluing the edge, I put the mirror on a little furniture mover, which is such a helpful tool for just moving it around easily, especially if you're painting and you don't want to touch the edges, just really helpful. To secure the backing more tightly, I used some E6000 glue, again another one of my North American purchases, and fortunately I had a long shelf that was the same height as the mirror so I could clamp it all down securely. And I used a spare bit of wood on the bottom as well where it would be touching the mirror frame so that it just didn't dent that faux leather at all. Now, normally when I paint a mirror, I put playing cards or something like that under the edges and that stops getting paint on the mirror. However, on this day I couldn't find some playing cards, so I tried some scrapbook paper, but that was too thick, so that didn't work. So Goldilocks would have been very proud. I got there in the end with some scrap paper from my notebook, so let nobody tell my child that I'm going to be using their drawings of these very high quality drawings of camels and trains that I'm going to be protecting my mirror from paint with. I feel I should say they were created to entertain a child. It's just not something I generally do in my downtime, but you just have to trust me on that one. So if you're going to use paper under the mirror edges rather than card, it's important to remove it before the paint dries, otherwise your paper will just get stuck. You have a little bit more wiggle room with card, but with paper I would remove it straight away if you're going to use it. I didn't want to go straight to chalk paint on this faux leather material. I thought it would be a safer option to use a barrier adhesive. So this, I'm using some Slickstick, which I've used before on things like my fridge or on glass bottles. It also works well on laminate furniture. I just thought it would give me the best chance of the chalk paint adhering really well. To start, I lined my painter's tray with some foil, which is brilliant for a no mess cleanup at the end. And I did 2 coats of Slickstick in total, letting it dry for a few hours in between. Now you can sand in between coats to make sure that it's really smooth, but I wanted a bit more of a textured surface on this mirror frame, so I didn't sand in between coats because that wasn't a priority for me. After you've done your coats of Slickstick, however many you want to do, you want to leave it to dry fully for about 24 hours before you do any top coats of paint. Because I had the stitching in the corners, I wanted to be able to hide those, so I mixed in some sea spray, which is a texture additive, into my chalk paint to help disguise those and build up some texture on top of them. And the chalk paint colour I went with was called Drop Cloth, which is a beigey kind of cream. And I was picturing a sort of natural stone-like look for the end result. Sea spray is really easy to work with. You simply mix it into the chalk paint and depending on how thick you want it is how much you add. I used a separate plastic container, poured my chalk paint in, and then simply mixed in an amount of the sea spray. I stirred it together with a plastic spatula and applied it with this chip brush, so nothing too fine or delicate, as it would essentially just be dabbed on randomly to create a sort of natural textured look. I didn't want the chunks of sea spray to be too thick because I was going to add something on top of this, but enough that it gave it some dimension and character. I also added a bit more on the edges with my fingers just to help disguise that gap a bit so it looked a bit more natural. I gave it overnight to dry and I was really happy with how it was looking. It looked a lot more warm and prettier in my opinion. Because it was dry, I dusted it briefly just to make sure that any of the loose texture was wiped away because I didn't want to seal anything in that wasn't secure to the surface. Now this was the fun bit, adding the dark and interesting colour on top. I used some chalk paint called Caviar, which is a true black, and brushed it on top of the creamy drop cloth underneath. Between the texture of the sea spray and the drop cloth underneath, which added some more colour dimension, this made it look so interesting and fun, almost like it was volcanic. I dabbed the Caviar on and then used a mister bottle to move it around a lot to lighten it up and bring back those lighter colours underneath. And then I dabbed off anywhere that had a bit too heavy of a look with a paper towel. Then finally, to seal the piece, I used some clear coat in Flat. So Flat is a matte version of a top coat. I used matte to maintain that natural looking stony kind of look. Matte probably gives the least amount of protection of all the finishes in top coats. However, this is a mirror. Once it's on the wall, it's not going to be moved around very much or touched very much, so I'm not worried about that. If I had a dark and moody interior room that would showcase this volcanic kind of mirror, I think that would look amazing. Or even a dramatic fireplace. However, I don't have that in my house unfortunately, so I took to the outside to contrast with some flowers, nature, wood to show what it looks like. This project was so much fun to make, and I'll have to find out whether it's been upgraded from something so ugly that it wasn't even worth bringing into the house to something that makes a bit more of a talking point. Thank you for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Did you prefer the "that's so ugly" before or the more natural looking after? Let me know what you think. Thanks so much. Until next time. Bye.